Vikings Tonight is brought to you in part by U.S. West Direct, publisher of the Yellow Pages, and by Midwest Federal, your good tree to come to for shelter since 1891.
Broad shoulders.
Dick Butkus, gimpy knees and all, shared a moment with Jerry Burns before the game.
Nitschke played in a bloody rage, as did Chicago's Dick Butkus.
It was Butkus who made middle linebacker a nasty word for running backs, wide receivers, and quarterbacks alike. Butkus has long since retired, but the man in the middle is Mike Singletary, who had a hand in 11 tackles today.
I think, defensively, their leadership in Singletary is outstanding. I mean, when you just watch him on the field, he just exudes confidence in what he's doing, how he's going about doing it, and he's the spark that makes the club go from a defensive standpoint.
For most of the game, the song remained the same. The Vikings could muster only 159 total yards. They averaged less than 3 yards per offensive play. Minnesota managed only 11 first downs.
Defense is outstanding, fellas. We're just getting better every week, and we're going to try to get there. They're playing good. I was impressed because of the pressure, and we did blitz a little bit, but there wasn't that much. I was impressed by the overall pressure the big front four put in there.
Furthermore, the Bears made a habit of getting in Tommy Kramer's face all day. The Bears were given credit for 7 sacks, led by Steve McMichael's 2.5. This was all accomplished without their all-pro defensive end, Richard Dent, out with an injury.
They got a good scheme. They just play hard, and they got reckless people out there. They just go after everybody, and they send everybody but the kitchen sink and Dick over there. So they have a really good scheme that they kept from last year, and they just using it a little differently. And they didn't even have their best pass rusher in there in Dent. So it remains to be seen what their defense can do.
Gentlemen, welcome again to the show. Darren Nelson, Greg Coleman, and Scott Studwell. Watching that Bears defense from the sidelines, they obviously don't miss Buddy Ryan, their defensive coordinator.
I don't really think they're the same team that they were a year ago, but they certainly proved that they have the potential to be today. Anyway.
Why do you say that, Scott?
Well, I don't think up to this point, at least up until today, that they have played the way they have. I think they weren't as consistent as they were a year ago, and they weren't as dominating as they were a year ago, but obviously, it certainly didn't show out today, but they've got a good team, and they've got good personnel, and it's going to take our best effort to beat them, and it's just something that we couldn't get done today.
Speaking of defense, I would think that the members of the defensive club of the Minnesota Vikings have to take a lot of pride in their performance today, perhaps with the exception of 3 plays.
I think for the most part, we played pretty well. You take 3 plays out of their offense, you probably take 150 yards of total offense out of their day, so it was a good effort. Everybody played hard, and it's unfortunate that you have those breakdowns, but you've got to give the Bears some credit, and you've got to give McMahon some credit. And, a couple of those passes were right on the money, and we had good coverage on him, and he's the spark to that offense, and I think they do just enough to win, and their defense wins a lot of football games for them.
Darren, before we talk about the Vikings offense, I want to talk about Darren Nelson. You went out after the first quarter. Rib injury was what we heard in the press box at Soldier Field. Can you give us an update on how you're feeling tonight? I'm sure it's not very good right now.
Well, as long as I don't laugh, breathe real deeply, or cry or anything, I'm doing pretty well.
Now, what happened? I understand. Did William Perry actually fall on you? Is that how you got hurt?
Well, actually, I was running with the football, and I had the ball pressed up against my ribs, and then Otis Wilson hit me and knocked me down, and then William, the refrigerator, fell on me.
That's what, 300 and X amount of pounds?
Well, he's a long way from 308, we'll put it that way. He's more like about 358.
It's only Sunday night, but do you have any thoughts on whether or not you will be able to play next week, or is it something you'll just have to wait and see, and how much will it affect you if you had to play a game already?
Well, normally I heal pretty quickly, so I'm hoping that I'll be ready to play.
The Bears, let's talk about the Vikings offense. How you plan to attack the Bears defense today? They say you can't run against that Bears defense, that you have to throw, but yet with their outside rush that we saw so many times today, is it possible? Should have had the Vikings even run the ball a bit more today?
Well, we did have, I think, 1 or 2 plays that did work fairly well against them. There were these little sweep plays where we fake a sweep and then cut it back inside. I think Ted ran about 3 of them that worked pretty well. But for the most part, you can't really run the football consistently against the Bears. I think our main goal was to pass a lot, maybe 40 or 50 times. But they kept putting so much pressure on Tommy that they kind of took us out of that also.
Greg, Obviously, Darren's hurting tonight. You guys really did take a physical beating out there today. You look around that locker room. Buster Rhymes might be out for 6 weeks. A long list of people who were hurt today.
You know, the Bears won the game, and they beat up on us pretty good. You know, there are no bones about it. We didn't play our best game, but we got him in a couple of weeks. Buster may be out for a little while, and we're definitely going to miss him on special teams.
You punted 8 times. I know the wind conditions were such. Did they affect every facet of the game out there today?
I don't think so. I had a few short punts, and that was strictly due to concentration. You know, I'm not going to, you know, sit back and say, well, you know, it was because of the swirling wind. I punted in Chicago before. Maury Buford, their punter, he did an outstanding job punting into the wind. I'm not going to make any bones about it. I just didn't get the job. I didn't watch the ball, you know, something very simple.
We're still leading the NFC in punting. You still, what, had a 44-yard average or something today?
Well, it came out 43. I don't know what the standings are going to be.
Speaking of people who are leading their departments, Tommy Kramer, if you look at his stats, was rated the #1 quarterback going into the this week's games in the NFL. Ended up with 11 out of 30. You mentioned Darren, he was trying to throw the ball maybe 40 or 50 times. Well, people look at the stats, and they'll perhaps obviously reflect the Vikings offense. They'll say, well, Kramer had a bad day. But was it a combination of Kramer having a bad day, perhaps the offensive line not being able to do the job they have been doing, or do you give credit to the Bears defense, or all three?
Well, I think it's basically all three. I think the Bears' defense was probably the main reason. You know, they rushed Tommy. I think he got sacked 7 times, which is more times than he's been sacked all year, I think. And, you know, I don't think Tommy had his best game either. I don't think our team as an offense played well at all.
But you feel you guys could come out of this game and say, we got these guys in 2 weeks offensively. We learned from what happened out there today, and we can perhaps improve on that a little bit later. We saw what you guys did against them last year at the Dome.
Oh, I definitely think that we can move the ball against them. It's just a matter of us having the confidence to do it. But right now, we can't think about playing the Bears because we have to play the 49ers, and their defense is pretty tough also.
That's a major obstacle. We'll talk about that just a bit later. Well, Doug Martin was named NFC Defensive Player of the Month this week. After the game, I talked with the Vikings defensive end who was physically and emotionally spent. Graded just on one game. You've got the 49ers next week and the Bears to come. You feel this team has the character to bounce back?
If we don't, we're going to get put back in awfully long ways. I think we had the character to bounce off this, and you know, it's going to hurt for a while. Personally, for me, I know it's going to hurt, but I want to get over it, come out Monday and start getting ready for the 49ers because, hey, it's not going to get any easier the next few weeks.
Thanks for staying up with us on this late Sunday night. Earlier this week, defensive coordinator Floyd Peters was saying about the Bears offense, they piddle around back there, Peyton for 3 or 4 yards, Suey for another 3. Then Jim McMahon will hit those little dink passes, and all of a sudden, then they hit you with that big play. And Scott, did the defense, you feel, protected pretty well against that, and that was your game plan going in, looking for that big play?
I think for the most part we did. Obviously, as much as you practice it, you can't always contain it, and it's those were the plays that hurt us today. There's no question about it. We played well against the, like you said, the short runs and the little dink passes, and the big plays hurt us. And if we want to be a great defense, we can't allow that to happen to us.
Do you feel the Bears can afford to take a lot of gambles offensively, knowing the way their defense plays most every week?
I think they probably can, probably a lot more so than other teams. But anytime you've got a quarterback like Jim McMahon who can run around with the football as well as he can and find receivers, they've got some great speed on the outside with Galt, and Ortegos, he showed a lot of speed today too. I was really surprised with his speed. So I think they can take some chances, and they always have and probably always will. And anytime you have a defense like they have that can come in and shut people out, obviously you can do those kind of things.
That first quarter is like watching a heavyweight fight. It was like a chess game. They're fighting each other out, feeling each other out. Nothing much happened. A good defensive play. But then we'll show you what happens, exactly what we're talking about early in the second quarter. David Howard throwing Calvin Thomas for a loss, bringing up a 3rd and 14.
David's been playing well for us all year long. And so there were a lot of big plays and a lot of good plays out there today defensively. And when you make big plays like that, you've got to try and follow up on them. And then all of a sudden they turn around and do this to us. So that hurts. And we had good double coverage on him, and you just see a perfect strike. And it's really nobody's fault. It's just a good execution on Chicago's part.
Any slowing down in Walter Payton that you've seen?
Maybe just a little bit, but not much. He's still the greatest back to ever play the game, and I think Walter will play till he's 45.
The way he's going and how durable he is, Darren, I'm sure That's something you can admire in Walter Payton.
No, definitely. Although he doesn't have people like the Frizz falling on him every week. Also.
Maybe in practice he does.
Maybe.
So it's 7-0 right now, Bears. Any thought about changing anything on the sidelines? Obviously, Ted Brown went in. You went out with that rib injury. Teddy's been through a few of these battles before.
Right. Well, I don't think we really changed anything. You know, we really hadn't run much of our offense yet, really. I mean, the Bears had basically shut us down. So I think basically what we're going to try to do is throw the ball as much as possible and hopefully get a big play of our own.
Came close a few times. The Bears were leading 10-0 and threatening to turn it into a rout just before the half. When the Vikings stopped them 3 times from the 1-yard line. Talk about a momentum switch. Tell us, Scott, what defensive signals you call and what you look for from the Bears here.
Well, basically, anytime they have Perry in the football game on their defense or on their goal line, obviously you anticipate a lead block by him, and usually Walter bringing the ball in behind him. And when they get real close, generally McMahon likes to sneak the ball. As you've seen here, he tried it twice and couldn't get in. And the defensive scheme was just right, and everybody executed it exactly the way he wanted it done. And
now here's the 4th down play. Did you expect perhaps Payton to get it here?
Well, I think when you're that close, they probably only had inches to go that you can really anticipate the quarterback trying to keep the ball. And the guys up front really did a great job of penetrating, and as you see, Joey came in and made the big hit. And that could have been a big series for us. Unfortunately, it didn't really turn the fortunes of the game around, but anytime you stop Chicago down there, you've really done something.
They don't often get stopped from inside the 5-yard line,
especially with a 350-pound back in there.
You know, it's interesting because the second guessers, I was watching Mike Ditka come off the field. They were all over the head coach of the Bears. The fans are right on top of the play at Soldier Field. But when Ditka left the field, he was exchanging words and salutes, should I say, with the fans after the Bears were stopped 3 times from the 1. But Iron Mike defended each and every play.
We went with quarterback sneak on the short yardage play. We missed it. We missed the plays down at the goal line. We got a bunch of hecklers in the stands. I'll still call the play again. I'll call it again, and I'll call it again. Because if I don't, Mr. Hallis is going to roll over in his grave. And if we can't make 6 inches, then we just don't deserve it, period.
Well, credit to the Vikings. And, Greg, I would think at halftime that, listen, everyone's got to be feeling up all of a sudden. Could have been 17-0 game.
Whenever you stop the world champions, I mean, in their own backyard on, 1st and 4, inside the 5-yard line, that's a great tribute to our defense, and Floyd Peters, as Scott has mentioned, just what the doctor ordered, do, execute, do what we're supposed to do. And it was a big momentum swing, in the locker room, you could just feel the excitement. Hey, this game was ours for the taking, if we executed and we didn't beat ourselves and make mistakes. And that's what happened.
The Vikings did get the ball to start the second half, and they took the opening kickoff. Rufus Best replacing the injured Buster Rhymes took it back to the Vikings' 41-yard line.
Rufus did a great job.
Return, Tommy Kramer connected with Steve Jordan for a rare 17-yard gain. They drove all the way to the Bears' 20 when Dave Duerson crashed the Vikings' backfield one more time. Kramer then became the center of controversy when an official ruled he intentionally grounded the ball. Kramer's subsequent verbal outburst earned the Vikings an additional 15 yards, pushing Minnesota out of field goal range.
I don't see how you can ground the ball intentionally when you're trying to throw the ball downfield to a receiver. He's 10, 12 yards downfield, and the guy's grabbing you around the waist. I mean, where else is the ball going to go sometimes? I mean, I don't know what the official was looking at or if he even saw the receiver down there, but I thought it was a terrible call.
You upset with Kramer at all for his outburst after the intentional grounding?
Oh, I've seen that happen before. No more upset with him than Anthony Carter on the sidelines. It's a very emotional game, and it's a very testing, trying time down there. And it's easy enough to say, hey, you can't, there's no question you can't do it. And I told him so, and the intentional grounding was accentuated by the person with the foul, the 15-yard penalty. And so, I'm upset with him, but I can see the circumstances.
It's a tough call there, guys. I mean, Darren, let's face it, it is an emotional game, and I'm sure very many times you can lose your cool, especially if you feel the call went against you. The coaches stress that, and how difficult is it to keep under control? That you can hurt our team by taking a penalty.
Well, it's just like you have 45 guys on the team, and everybody's different. And you're right, it is a very stressful game that we play, but I think you have to think about what you're doing. You know, that play hurt us, and I think Anthony Carter's play hurt us. I mean, Tommy's play took us out of field goal range, so that's a possible 3 points. Maybe we get some momentum and score some more points out of that. We have to
fine line between what you can say to the officials and what you can't, and obviously we crossed over that line a couple times today, and it hurt us, and you can't afford to do that, especially against the Bears. You can't afford to do it any time, but when you're in the situation we were in the ball game with maybe only 10 minutes left to play, we were still in the football game, and we took ourselves out of field goal range 2 or 3 times with penalties, and especially penalties like that, and that hurts you. Anytime you can get some points on the board, you can turn things around, and it's unfortunate those things happen.
We'll have more on the Vikings-Bears game right here on the Vikings Tonight, coming up next. Special teams got the break they were looking for on Greg Coleman's 7th punt of the day. Greg, it was Chris Martin coming up with the fumble recovery here.
Well, you know, one thing that Bernsey told us that the special teams had to make a contribution, that, you know, that we had to score, and, you know, our cover guys, these are guys that you don't hear about. You know, Chris Martin, these guys were starting, Jim Huff. You know, you don't hear about them much, but they make an outstanding contribution on special teams, and that was the break we were looking for.
And here's Anthony Carter, first reception, but watch what happens.
You know, it's just that kind of day for us, you know, trying to stretch for the extra yard. You know, it was just tough. It was a tough break, and Anthony being frustrated, you know, he knocked the ball out of the official's hand, and it was just a tough day for him.
You just mentioned Ortegol. Here's an example of his speed and defensive breakdown here, Scott. One of the few we saw.
Well, we happened to have a safety blitz on, and both Ortegol and McMahon read it, and he ran a quick slant, and he got the ball to him and just outran us to the end zone. It was a good play on their part. We took a gamble and got burned.
You feel at that time, too, listen, you guys spent a lot of the day out on that football field. It's easy once in a while to have that kind of a breakdown. If you feel that the offense wasn't, you know, putting its points on the board, and eventually you're going to have a type of a breakdown against the Bears.
It happens, but if we want to be contenders, we can't allow it to happen. It's going to happen. It happens to everybody, and it's going to happen to us. But when you're in a tight ball game like that, and you still got a chance, you can't afford to let those big plays happen. And it's something that we've got to guard against. And I think we're playing well, but if we want to be a great defense, we've got to eliminate those.
I know you got the Bears coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk about the 49ers. Before we do, let's dismiss the Bears by saying, are they that much better? I mean, you talk about all their all pros. They got Richard Dent sitting on the sidelines coming off the bench. He didn't even play today because he's hurt. Al Harris is playing special teams. Here's a guy who was all pro 2 years ago, and he's coming back. Todd Bell, people like that, are they that much better? They just get that kind of publicity because they're the world champs.
There's no question that they've got a lot of talent. They really do. And they've got a lot of talent in their backup people as well. But as Bernsey told us after the game, I think we can play with them. I really do. But we have to play our best football. And they're a good football team, and they're probably the best football team in the league right now. But they're not unbeatable. I think we can beat them. I think there's some other teams that can beat them. But we've got to play better, and it's that simple.
You'll have your chance again, obviously, in a couple of weeks. Well, Jim McMahon finished today with 12 of 19 passes completed for 204 yards. He also rushed for 25 yards. Keith Ortegol, yes, Keith Ortegol, in his second year from McNeese State, had his biggest day as a pro with 6 catches for 157 yards. McMahon and Ortegol had a sneak preview of the Vikings in their game films.
They watched films of last week's game, and they were ready for Willie coming across the middle. And they were jumping Willie and leaving the middle open, so that's why I started going to Keith more.
They played a lot of man-to-man out there. It's mostly you just go out and beat him. That's it. You know, it's one-on-one. We practice that every day, so when you beat them in practice, you beat them in the games.
Talk about no names. Keith Ortegol is one that all of a sudden has become a household name, at least in Chicago for the week.
Anytime you concentrate on the Galts and the Moorheads and the Paytons, it always seems like every time we do that, somebody else pops up, and it just happened to be him today.
Chicago winning the final 23-0. Now on to things as rough and tumble as the football field. As Gorilla Monsoon would say, life is hard in the squared circle. The squared circle is, of course, the wrestling ring, where people like Jesse the Body Ventura make life miserable for lots of other big brutes like himself. We've been getting, some letters saying that we're making life miserable for Greg Coleman. Well, Greg, you know that isn't true, especially since you and Jesse have a few threats or make that things to say right here to us on the Vikings Tonight. What's coming up? Stay tuned. little comic relief. You know, over the last couple of weeks, Greg Coleman has been saying that we've been sort of picking on him. Well, Greg decided to get a huge support system to back his side of, is a punter really an athlete? Here's Greg's rebuttal with his close personal friend.
For most of you who have been following Vikings tonight, recently, the last couple of weeks, it's been Scott Studwell and Darren Nelson ragging on yours truly. Tonight, I'm with my friend Jesse the Body Ventura. Hulk Hogan right now is out beating up on Paul, Mr. Wonderful Orndorff, so he couldn't be with us. But Jesse, you are familiar with the two culprits, Spudwell and Nelson. What do you have to say about those two?
Well, first of all, Greg, I don't like the idea of them not calling you an athlete. For one thing, this guy's got some brains. He can do announcing like me, you know. Him and I are athletes, Spudwell. Darren Nelson, I'm not even going to honor you with nothing because anybody that's under 6 feet tall shouldn't even be playing sports. But first of all, I'm lining this right at you, Spudwell. 2-3 years ago, I issued a challenge to you to step into the ring with me just one time. And you wouldn't do it unless you could wear helmet, shoulder pads, thigh pads, and every other pad named to man. Spudwell, well, I'm still here. Take a look at Jesse the Bite. Look at that arm right there, Spudwell, and eat your heart out because you'll never be as good as me, and I'm a movie star now. You thought you had a good-looking face, Spudwell? You've taken one too many cleat marks in the face.
Your knees are shaking, Scott.
Well, I'm glad he went into movies. He was a lousy wrestler.
Now, Greg, tell us the truth. Are you finished with this nonsense?
What do you mean nonsense? These are...
I thought he was supposed to prove that you were an athlete. I think they was talking about themselves.
These are my friends. I mean, they come to the rescue. I mean, you know, maybe they'll help us out in a couple of weeks when we decide to beat up on the Bears again.
You know, it is interesting. Seriously, we have been getting a few letters saying everything from that I'm insensitive because I've been picking on you, and that Mr. Coleman, that Mr. Coleman's getting the brunt of these attacks from Mr. Nelson and Mr. Studwell and
lawyers and wives and...
You guys are really best of friends. We're really just showing a side of things that...
Guess you won't be riding home with me tonight, right, Greg?
I need a ride home.
Yeah, I thought so.
In all sincerity, you know, we carry on quite a bit, you know, because football is such an intense sport. You know, you've got to relieve yourself some kind of way, you know, comically or whatever. And, you know, we just ride each other. You know, if you've got thin skin, if you're in our locker room, anything like that, you don't stand a chance. So, no, everything is okay between Darren and I and Scott. If not, I'll call Jesse again.
Thank you for cleaning it up. Very quickly, Scott, let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers next week. Jeff Kemp is in at quarterback. They don't seem to have missed a beat without Joe Montana right now.
I don't think they're the same team. Anytime you lose a quarterback like Joe Montana, obviously you've got to do some other things. But obviously he's playing fairly well. He threw 3 touchdowns today, I think. Jerry Rice has turned into a great receiver for him. Offensively, they've got a lot of weapons. I think the running back situation is a little bleak right now. They've got some people banged up a little, but their defense is playing extremely well, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on us defensively this week to perform and keep them out of the end zone if we want to win this football game.
Darren, we certainly hope to see you back in the Minnesota Vikings lineup next Sunday when the Vikings take on the San Francisco 49ers. And by the way, a program note, because of the Vikings game next Sunday in San Francisco, we'll be getting back very, very late next Sunday night. So we'll have our Vikings Tonight show next Monday. That's next Monday, live at 6:30 with the Vikings Tonight. That's because we'll be getting in, as I mentioned, just a little bit too late from San Francisco. So join us again next Monday at 6:30 right here on the Vikings Tonight. Good night, everyone.
Vikings Tonight, brought to you by Midwest Federal.